It's all possible. And I don't say that in a very as a trite expression, but if you know that what you're doing is purpose based and your vision is clear, the trip is worth the travel. So whatever you got to do to get there, you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. The numbers don't tell the story. The likes don't tell the story. The shares don't tell the story. Be true to what your purpose is. Make sure that your heart is pure. Keep pushing.
Welcome back to the Too Stubborn to Fail podcast, where we tell stories about overcoming adversity. My name is Darren Perkins, and I am your show host today. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We got a real special guest in the building today. So I got so much stuff to say, but let me introduce this good brother today. He's a fellow content creator, entrepreneur, dedicated husband, father, just an overall dope individual. Derek Johns, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good, my brother. That introduction got a little overwhelming at the end. Overall, dope, brother. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we first met in a podcast mentorship, and whenever you join a group of any kind, and you get to meet these people for the first time, naturally you kind of speaking for myself, I kind of people watch and go off vibes. I always go off vibes, and you seem to be you and I seem to be similar in that we were okay with being off to ourselves, but when engaged can still create intellectual conversation. And I always thought that you were solid, and I was able to come on your platform. I appreciate you having me. Unpacked a lot. I think a lot that we talked about on your platform specifically, um, pertaining to my dad, I had never told anybody before, so it was very therapeutic, and it really it was the first time that I ever discussed any of that. So I appreciate you for having me on. Had to get you on. I see the grind. I follow you daily. I see the progress, and it's just an honor to have you on, bro.
Appreciate that, man. And definitely want to give you your flowers. I appreciate you were early on the podcast. We got it done, I think, between sessions in Miami at one of the masterminds. And I am, people sometimes do read me as standoffish, but I definitely people watch. I've become a lot more conscious of my time and my energy. So it's not about it's not about being above anybody, but making sure that you're channeling your energy in the right way at the right time as much as possible. So dope brother, one dope brother to another, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And like I said, people watching, and not only people watching, but getting to know people, over the course of, a year membership. And it was basically a course at the end of the day. So, going to class every Monday and seeing, you actually get to learn more about people and actually kind of become family with the people who are consistent. So it was really dope to see you grind and get to meet you on a personal level somewhat, and just enjoying the progress. Not only you being the inspiration to me, and I'm sure others in the that was in the mentorship. It's just dope to see it. For me, I always saw, even early, and I'm sure you had the plan coming into it, it was always bigger than just a podcast for you. I could tell by the equipment that you had, just how you approached it. It was never really just about a podcast. And of course, being in a program like we were in, you had a range of people that didn't even had no idea what they wanted to do, and then there were people like yourself who already had things mapped out. Maybe not to a T, but you kind of had an idea, grand scheme of what you wanted to do with things, and I thought that was pretty dope to see.
Yeah, man, definitely has always been bigger than the podcast. The group actually helped me with accountability. Salute to David Shands. Let's not dance around with the mentorship was, but salute to David Shands. Sleepers for Suckers on IG, Social Proof Podcast. What I got from it was that accountability, right? I'm the kind that if I put something out there, especially on camera, I'm very likely to do it, right? And then also for me, I knew I wanted a certain quality because the podcast is part of my fatherhood journey, right? It's keeping me accountable, dealing with my son, hence the name Dear Son. And it's really parenting in general and me growing as a man in that space. But for me, it was also my business card, right? Because I wanted to show where I started, how I was developing, and get to a skill set and a quality that people would say, "Hey, can you do that for me?" Right? Or trust me with their projects or with their vision. Because ultimately, for me, it's a network play. I just want to tell beautiful Black stories responsibly. So that's a whole range of things. But the reps from doing the podcast, um, being inspired, being motivated by others, and just that intentionality of getting better has definitely been life changing for me.
Absolutely, bro. And I just can tell, speaking from my podcast journey or content creation journey, I'm way more comfortable, with speaking with others and just creating a dope show from episode 1 to now. So believe it or not, this is episode 40 for me. If you'd asked me
Let's
this
go.
2 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago, I had no plans of doing this. And to see that, I'm comfortable enough to have people of your caliber on my show, and just to have a really, intellectual, dope dialogue is huge for me. Um,
Yeah.
and that was the goal initially getting started for me, was to get out of that shell. Like I talked about earlier, I'm a little more reserved naturally, but joining that mentorship, like you said, salute to David Shands, really helped me, break through that. And now I see that, just building that muscle up of having these conversations on a weekly basis and just seeing the progress is it's really inspiring for me. And I appreciate people like you coming on a weekly basis, giving me, a moment of your time where we all got things going on. So that also was another reason why, it was so important for me to have you on, is just showcasing that, that ability. And I wanting to give you your flowers. But before we dive more into that conversation, I always
Ho
like to
ho
get,
ho, bro, ho bro,
yeah,
ho bro. Because the flowers can't be one way. I don't like that. I don't even like receiving flowers. I've seen your growth as well, man. Definitely from even when we had the conversation, observing you, and then what we got out of the conversation we had, I felt like it was two different people. I didn't know how deep you were going to go, so I appreciate you being open and honest. Got a lot of good response from that, and it's a beautiful story, and I hope you continue to tell it. But I've seen the growth in your platform as well. I've seen you pulling up on people, just like we started with the tag in the beginning. Like you pulling up on people, asking them about that, and I could tell that it's personal for you and it's purposeful for you, right? So salute to walking in your purpose, man. Don't stop, man. You at episode 40. You go look up in a couple months, it's gonna be 50, 60. I'm still chasing 100, man. I think I got 76 up and I got a few in the tuck. So we on a push to get to 100. That's a major milestone for me. But it's dope to see those that hung on to it, because you start a program, they say look to the left and the right, just like they do first day of college or whatever. One of those people are not going to be there. I don't know what the intent was for a lot of the people that were there, and maybe they got what they needed out of it, right? Maybe it was a personal development that's manifesting in other areas of their life, but it's really only a few of us, right? So I'm hoping that the few of us continue, and then maybe those that kind of dropped off pick their shows back up, or find their purpose in another way to express it in the content space. So salute to you, man. Flowers go they both ways, man.
appreciate you for that. But yeah, like you said, just We started off with a group of people, and just like anything that you start off with, everybody is not going to be there at the end. We just know that human nature. At some point, life is going to hit you in the throat, and you need to realize why you started what you started, and that's what's going to keep you going. And also look to those who are doing, not necessarily better, but continuing or doing something that you would aspire to be. And that's what you were for me, honestly. You were one of the ones, and one of the few that remain consistent, always put out content. We all go through those times, especially in our lives where things get hard. That's just life. But just realizing that this is still important on some level to me as well, and I have to continue to tell my story. And for me personally, like I said, it's therapeutic getting in front of this camera. Uh, you know, saying some of the things that I go through during the week or through the course of a lifetime, or even on your platform where I talked about my childhood. All of that stuff is therapeutic. And I think it's important for us to say what's on our mind sometimes, depending on what's on your mind. But I have seen some stuff that's questionable, but platforms like yours, um, I will always continue to support on whatever level, and it also inspires me to keep going. So I thank you for those flowers back, my brother. But what I like to do with all my guests is kind of get a feel for, what was home for you growing up? Where was home for you?
So, home, man, home is Hampton. I grew up between Hampton and Newport News, Virginia. The area code is 757. That's probably the most notable. So we had athletes like Ron Curry, Allen Iverson, Mike Vick. A bunch of people came from out of that area. So it's a small town feel now that I moved away, but I didn't know it when I was there. I thought we was I thought we was big city. But I grew up in a loving household, two-parent household. I'm the youngest of two. My sister's 5 years older than me. I don't have any real like crazy stories about childhood. Thank God, and I don't take that for granted. Nor am I saying it as a flex. I had great parents, a great family structure, um, very religious based household. So that created the dynamic between me and my dad, where I thought I should have some different freedoms and be able to do some things that he didn't allow in his household, primarily because of the religious beliefs. And I started kind of pulling away from conversations with my dad, interactions, because of that. So 13, 14, I don't know if every son, but a lot of the men I know went through the phase of they start feeling themselves, thinking they're more mature than they are. And it's wild because through this journey on the platform, I have more conversations with men and understanding the perspective of not having a father, right? And what that can do to a relationship, or a father not being in the home. Let me start there. I had my father in my home, and I created a dynamic that put space in between us. So in hindsight, I feel a way, real guilty about that. But my dad was old school, right? He came from the generation of be seen, not heard. His dad had a third grade education, and his primary focus was providing. So it wasn't a whole lot of love and affection and affirming. It was by way of providing, this is how I love my family. And that's what he knew. So there wasn't a lot of dialogue. He didn't get a lot of the soft skills in terms of interacting with people from his dad. Then his dad died when my dad was somewhere between 20 and 22. So he also didn't have a father as an adult, right? So now I'm looking at, from a 13-year-old lens, at a man that I think is parenting me not the way that I want to be parented, but what do I know at 13? And he's also dealing with the fact that he's been going the last however many years without his dad, trying to figure life out. And I didn't know or recognize that he needed grace at that point, right? And again, my dad, I didn't get abused, and, and I jokingly say, by the standards of the day, I got beat. I mean, I got whooped, and that's just what it was back then. But even in conversations with him now, he expresses that that's what he knew, and he wished that he had the what is it, the maturity, the emotional is what I was reaching for, the emotional maturity to kind of deal with me different and have more conversations. He was more the mindset of there has to be a recourse associated with your disobedience. And it has to be immediate, it has to be swift, and it needs to be painful so that it'll lessen the likelihood of you, stumbling again. But I was definitely the kid that had to touch the hot stove, right? So the things that I got caught for, I never questioned whether a beating was the right thing. Again, based on that time and place, right? Like, yeah, I knew it wasn't like he was just coming out taking out aggression on me because of what happened at work. It was no, you got me. I mean, and but kind of is what it is. I also, me looking at hindsight, know that the beatings didn't actually help. Like the beatings, at some point, the beatings became a consequence, right? Just like the people, and I'm not making them parallel, but when you get into the drug game or whatever illegal activity, you know that jail is a consequence at some point, right? Or some pain or some hurt or possibly dying. That's what it was. You don't stop doing it. A lot of people don't stop doing it, and then when they get caught, they're like, it kind of came with it. For me, that's what whippings became. Like it was calculated. Like, man, it's gonna hurt for he gonna beat me for about a minute and 30 seconds. I'm gonna be able to block the first four. Then he gonna tear me up. It was that kind of thing. So I knew dealing when I became a parent, I wanted a slightly different approach. And when I started as a parent, I kind of defaulted to that because that's what was programmed. But luckily I had girls first and I can never whip my girls. They might have got popped a couple times, but I could basically look at them and they start crying. But when my son came along, my first son, I was like, oh, open chest season. Let's get it. Right. And it was like revenge parenting. I've said that before. Like, yeah, like I'm out. It was, I couldn't wait to get off. Like I thought my dad was getting off on me, but I had the wrong focus, man. So a real twisted response to what you were
I
asking.
don't
Great
know. It
childhood,
was
grew up in
honest.
Hampton Roads. I went to yeah, 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 yeah.
Man, that 12, 13, I don't know what it is, but that's a tricky age. It's like kids shift when when they enter their teens, and I really can't still really can't put my finger on it. But it seems like they become a completely different person, for the better or for the worse. They that's where they kind of, like you said, they kind of feel themselves, they grow into themselves, and I guess enter into that next phase of life. And it can be tough as a parent to navigate those waters, because you don't want to have to crack the whip all the time, but you always think big picture. You want to raise responsible adults. You don't want any of your kids to be in jail or in a situation where you don't want your daughters on the pole. You don't It's certain things that you absolutely, like, they're just unacceptable. And as a dad, it's our we kind of take that on us to be there. We don't want them to have those daddy issues that result to those other things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, sometimes the danger with that I'm recognizing again through this journey is that me not wanting certain things for my children initially was a reflection of me not being embarrassed publicly. It really had nothing to do with who they are as children and what they needed emotionally. It was, no, the family name has to be protected. So don't you dare, like when you go in the store, don't ask for nothing, right? If you ever came from that generation don't ask for nothing, don't pick nothing up, don't touch nothing, right? That's not about, in my opinion, that's not about guiding or giving a child a skill set so much as it is you want to avoid the public embarrassment of what they might do or how you might respond, but that has to do with your emotional intelligence and wherewithal as a parent, right? And I picked up on a lot of that moving to different areas, especially living overseas. When we go to the mall to be out in public, we see kids running around what we thought was like acting reckless, and my kids would always look at me, right? And they knew, and people would say, man, your kids are so well behaved. And then I realized that where we were, there wasn't the dangers that there were in the US. We lived in the UAE for a little while, so there wasn't the dangers. So I'm bringing a US mentality there about that. And also, their children are more likely to explore later in life and be curious because they were allowed to be curious as children. and we define that different culturally. So that's one thing that I become more aware of is yes, you want your children to behave and you want to keep them out of danger, but the default no that limits their ability to actually explore things and that might actually limit their creativity is something that I, like I said, I realized of late. And luckily, well, not luckily, we have 5 children, but they kind of clustered in a set of three and a set of two, right? So we had three basically between 18 and 24 months apart between each of them when the span of 6 years. And then we had the last two 16 months apart, right? So we got this dynamic of the test babies, you know what I'm saying? When we would try to figure life out. And then the way that we're, some of the things that I'm more tolerant of with my younger children, I think my older children be like, man, how'd you get away with that? But like I try to be more aware of why I'm parenting a certain way. Is it about me or is it about what my children actually need?
Yeah. I mean, you're a different person, with each child. And especially if, like you said, you had the gap. There's no way that you can be the same parent with the first cluster as the second cluster. It's like if we are doing what we're supposed to do as people and growing and maturing, um, everything that we do is different. Hopefully every year we grow, but essentially a few years down the road, you shouldn't be the same person that you were. So how you parented the first group is going to be different from how you parent the second group. And it's unfortunate that maybe sometimes the first group can be a little jealous of that. But things like you said, it's different. Things are different. You grow as a person. Hopefully, you more successful than you were starting out. Things just you gain a better understanding of things. So it's a lot of variables that go into that, and it's more times than not you will be a completely different person with the last ones that come out,
Absolutely.
and hopefully the first batch just understands that.
It is what it is at this
Hey, it is, it is.
point.
So we did go into the conversation with your father, and I jokingly we paying attention to you as a person and seeing the growth, and it's like, man, this guy just it seems like he has it all going on. It's like it's got to be something, and I finally found that the something was that you was a Cowboys fan. I was like, I knew it was something. But was your father the reason why you became a Cowboys fan, or was that something that you kind of got on your own?
First of all, salute to your skill set right there, because I did not see where you were going. I was trying to figure it out. I was like, we here. Yeah, man. And I just had an Eagles fan on my last episode and we went through this. But yeah, my dad was a Cowboys fan. It was mandatory in his house for probably the first 10 or 11 years of my life. And then basically the rule was you couldn't root for the Washington team. I don't know how they're defined at this point, but fun fact, they're not actually in Washington, so it's that whole thing is a scam. But you couldn't root for that team, and my family was kind of split like that. Half of us were Cowboys fans, the other half were them. And I became a Giants fans with Phil Simms was quarterback for a little bit, and it's just all I know. All right, and here's the thing now, and you know this, I'll engage a little bit, but after about 2 exchanges, you got it. Because I mean, I'm not that I'm really not invested anymore. I came here when we moved to Dallas, the area where we live now. I binged on games because I didn't have access. Number one, I couldn't afford it before, and they weren't as accessible as they are like living in the city. And I went to a bunch of games, and then they started jacking up the price, and I'm like, man, I really don't. I it all ha 70% of my friends, like my brothers from home, played football. So the group chat is all X and O's. And I'm like, dog, I have nothing to contribute. I don't know if he should have blocked low or high at the man. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know who was in motion. Bro. Bro, I don't care. But yeah, I still got I still got some apparel, some memorabilia. I still claim them, but the argument, like we just had the extent of the argument you're gonna have with me.
Well, really similar. I kind of grew up the opposite when it came to that. It was you better not root for the Cowboys. I don't care who you are. I would say predominantly about 80% of my family Washington fans. We are from the DMV originally, so everything was, Washington. But growing up in the '90s, I was too young to ever appreciate the glory days. So by the time I became conscious enough to play
The
and
glory
watch
day.
football,
The
glory day.
the glory day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
singular.
Um, but I missed that. So by the time I became conscious and actually got into watching football, that was over, and it really wasn't a whole lot to cheer for. So it was kind of hard for me to go that lane. Um, by the time I started actually paying attention to football was during the McNabb era. So naturally, that's what kind of drew me to them, and then they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots, and I've been a fan ever since, just through and through. But when it comes to, I do notice that the debate between Philly and Dallas can get downright ugly. But at the end of the day, it's only really two main things that come up. It's redundant. It's like, we talk about Dallas, you got the 5 championships that you can't refute. Philly is going to say that they were way back when. Nobody remembers that. And we only got one championship. So, it's kind of, it, it's going to be that same argument until one of us catches up, which that's going to be kind of hard, very hard to catch up to five. Um, but at this point, it's just a redundant kind of feud, and I'm just a football fan, so I will watch the Browns and the Jets play. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, at my core, I'm still an Eagles fan. I watch every game of theirs, but I'm an X's and O's guy as well. So I do enjoy just the brand and the game in general. But it is kind of fun to get into it with Cowboys fans from time to time until they get personal. Then you just got to cut it off at that point. But
Nah, you won't get that from me, man. And honestly, what really threw everything off was fantasy football. When I started getting into paid leagues for fantasy football, I didn't even like watching Cowboys games because I needed certain people to do certain things. And if they didn't, like, it's okay, we won, but we didn't win the right. I
I
didn't
didn't
win.
win.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't win. So
Yeah, I think fantasy got crazy for me when I started to pick up Cowboys fans. I mean, Cowboys players. And it kind of was a double edged sword because, of course, I don't want the team to win, but I still want Zeke to get off. I need him to get them 2 touchdowns. I need him to get 100 yards. And it felt weird. So I don't think, well, I say that, but I had Pollard last year. He helped me win my championship. So, uh, fantasy kind of takes me out of that. But if I don't have my fantasy hat on, it's always all green for me. But I thought I thought that it's funny because a lot of people that I know who are Cowboys fans, it's just in the family. And I guess that's how it goes with teams. A lot of the times, you do have some people who venture off and do their own thing, like me. But I think for the majority of the time, whatever the family is, that's what you tend to be. Um, and that's with everything, not just football. I thought that was dope. Um, but to get back to the Dear Son podcast, um, why was it, and you covered it a little bit earlier, but just to double back on that, why was it so important for you to create this platform, the Dear Son platform?
yeah, I came to a point where, so that age I was referencing, the 12 to 14-year-old, when I was kind of pulling back from my dad, living in the same house, but just not wanting to be in the same space with him, not wanting to have too many conversations. My son was that age. So he's 16 now. My oldest son was that age. And I'm like, I knew our communication was off, which is a thread for the men in my family as well, which I'm not proud of, but probably a thread or a theme for many men. Like, we didn't talk a lot. And with my career, I was gone a lot. Like, when my oldest son turned 1, I went to Iraq for a year as a contractor because I had fumbled the bag with the money and I was trying to get my family back on track. But he was left with 2 older sisters and 2 older female cousins, my wife, and, the rest of the family was in the area, but it was all female women energy. You're supposed to say women women energy. And, even when I would come home, it was like I'd come home for a couple weeks, he'd get used to me, and I'd be right back out. And that weighed on me early, and after that stint in Iraq for a year, I came back to the 757 for a few months, and then I got an opportunity for a career in the DMV. So in the Arlington area, I started working. The kids were in school. The older girls were in school, and it was, I got hired in October, so I started commuting. Like I drive up either Sunday night or Monday morning into work, stay with a family friend throughout the week, come home on the weekends. So I'm really absent. Like my intentions were good because I was, we needed the income, and ultimately the DMV area was better suited for my career. I was in government contracts, how that goes in that area. And, we went for another several months where I'm weekend dad, right? And I'm realizing this in hindsight, and I'm never establishing the relationships that I should have. We moved to the DMV, and that job I had international responsibility. So I'm traveling, right? I'm always gone, and I'm doing that to get ahead in my career and leaving my wife to manage the house in a lot of times, which again financially made sense, but I wasn't making the most of the time when I was there. So I started really leaning into, well, let me just be successful in corporate because I do that well. People respect me. I get promoted. We get raises and all these things, and it can create a quality of life that maybe would be a good trade off. That was a fallacy, and that went on for years, right? So even leading up to when we had the opportunity to go overseas, by this time we had 5 children. We went to Dubai, which sounds very cool, and it was, cultural experience for them. But we're all together, but now I'm in the office 16 hours a day because Dubai is 8 or 9 hours ahead of the East Coast, depending on what time of the year, if it's daylight saving time or not. So I'm the office guy. I'm running a department of supply chain. So I want to be there. I want to be the face. I want to set the tone. So I'm getting in the office, before everybody, leaving after everybody. But when it's time to leave there, the East Coast is just coming into the office. So now I'm spending another 4 or 5 hours after I spent 9 or 10 hours in the office trying to deal with the East Coast because I'm trying to be everything to everybody but my family. Right. And what I didn't realize is it was building up a resentment in me because I put myself in a situation, but I was kind of like trying to blame them because I'm doing this for y'all. Y'all didn't ask for it, but I'm doing this for y'all and y'all should be grateful. So there's these misunderstandings, or not even misunderstandings between us, but different understandings of what's happening. Like they have a viewpoint, the kids have a viewpoint. I'm normalizing what it is. My wife has a viewpoint, and I have a viewpoint, and they're not all aligned. So we're going through life with these different views of what family is, and I wasn't the leader that I needed to be to talk about. Like, here's why. How do y'all feel about it? So we spent 2015 to 2018 overseas, and we came back to the States. And I was so dedicated to corporate life. We literally moved from Dubai. We flew out after work Thursday. So I kind of worked a few hours that day, the day that we're leaving. We flew out early Friday morning there. We land in DC, what would be Friday on the East Coast. Our parents come pick us up from the airport. We drive back to 757 because we were parked there for a little while before we moved to Dallas. I was back to work on Monday. Like I timed our international move so that I didn't miss work, to give you kind of a perspective of where my focus and energy was misplaced. And when we moved back, I was sick and I didn't know it. Like I was diabetic, and I was having these symptoms that I would just ignore, and there was stress was inducing everything. And a couple weeks after we got to this, back to 757, I started traveling again. Then ultimately I came out to the Dallas Fort Worth area to set up shop because that's where we were going to move, and that's the office I was going to be tied to. So I'm ignoring all of these symptoms. I end up going home for a wedding back in the 757. Excuse me. And my mom looks at me and she was like, something's not right. My mom makes an appointment for me with the doctor. Now, I'm 39 at this point. Said 30, 38 or 38. Yeah, 39 at this point. And my mom makes an appointment for me to go to the doctor. And the whole time I was home, everything was off. Like I'm driving around in the city where I grew up in, and I couldn't, like I'm missing turns because I couldn't see street signs. And I'm like, something's off. I'm like, man, it's not that much reconstruction. I was lost in my own city trying to drive around. And I go to the doctor and I'm telling them all these things. I'm self-medicating. I'm like, yeah, I think it's this, I think it's that. And the doctor's just listening to my foolishness. And he's like, yeah, I think you're diabetic. I was like, nah, I don't think that's it, bro. It's something different. They ran my blood test. My blood sugar level was like 560 something. A normal range for me is like somewhere between 80 and maybe 110. So I'm four times what it should have been, if not five. My A1C, which is another indicator, was 15 or 16. It should be somewhere between 7 and 9, right? And they gave me an insulin shot, and the nurse was like, I gotta teach you how to do this because you're gonna be doing it. I was like, nah, I'm not. I can't do the shots. But the day they gave me insulin, I slept for the first time more than 3 hours straight. For like 3 months, I'm waking up every 2 hours. Every 2 hours you gotta go to the bath. Like these are the things, and I'm just ignoring it because I didn't want to get off track at work. That's the point that I'm driving home. So my priorities were all over the place. So it forced a lifestyle change, and like I switched up my diet, my eating habits. At my heaviest recorded weight, I was 286 pounds. I never weighed myself again after that because I knew the number was going up and I didn't want to see it. So I went from there to my lowest is 206. I'm somewhere around 210 now because of a lifestyle change. But none of this would have happened had we stayed overseas or had I not slowed down or had my mom not made that appointment. And my point is, for all of what I was trying to do to take care of my family, I was killing myself to ultimately not be there for my family. So that shaped a whole lot of things. 2018, the whole family, we moved to Texas. Um, COVID hits in 2020 and travel stops. So when the travel stops, I'm forced to sit at home, which was good because there were a whole lot of issues that weren't being resolved because I was traveling so much. Problem pop up, just get on the plane, right? And you're gone long enough to tolerate it, right? Or forget about or not make it loses importance because you've been away. And that went on for years, but sitting because of COVID, I realized what I had as a family, and I was like, man, like I got a dope family, and I'm gambling, right? In the name of success, I'm trying to gamble with it. So the podcast is an extension of those revelations, right? Like, man, this relationship is not right. This relationship needs help, and it was important to address it with my son. It's important to address it with all of them, but I know that there's a cycle on the men in my family. Another thing that I realized lately talking to my dad was based on the records that he had available going back to mid 1850s, there hasn't been a Johns man that had a father and a son alive at the same time. So we got these gaps in information. Yeah, exactly. Like my kids have a grandfather, and I'm like, man, what's that? Like that's cool. I'm envious, but just not having those whatever can trickle from one generation to the next, even if it's not everything. When you cut those off, like you got problems that permeate and just grow. So doing this podcast, I actually when did we start the mentorship in 2020?
I get kind of foggy on that. I think it might be, if it was 2020, it was the very tail end. So
Yeah.
maybe 21.
Okay.
It was either the tail end of
Okay.
20 or the beginning of 21.
I know it was September, October. I know it was September because I put my first episode up a day after my birthday. My birthday, September 8th. But my point is, with whichever year it started, the Dear Son podcast, I put the trailer up 1 year before I did my first episode. So I had I had like God put it on my heart to do it, and then I did nothing for a year. So by the time I came into the mentorship, that was another chip on my shoulder that, man, I've wasted all this time. I'm not gonna get in here and waste time too. So the mentor, yeah, yep. I'm accountable. People are I know people will hold me accountable, at least ask me about it. And I put the first episode up, man. It might have been 35 or 40 minutes long, but it probably took me 8 hours to do because I was just in my head, like, man, how can I don't even know how to share this, but I got it out. Yeah, I know, I know you do. And it was just me too. Like it was just me. That's how I started. I didn't have guests or co-hosts at that point. But I got everything out and I felt relieved, right? Because once it was out, I could no longer I care about what people think. That was the difference. At that time, I cared about what people would think so much that I wouldn't do something. Now I'll do the thing. I still kind of care what people think, but it doesn't prevent me from actually getting my thoughts out. So um that's kind of the genesis, man. I know that was long winded, but
Hey, I mean, you actually answered a few follow up questions within your answer. So, like I said, honesty is what the show is about, and I never cut anybody off. But it answered a lot of my follow up questions. But one thing that I do want, if somebody is new to the platform and they've never heard of D Johns, never heard of Dear Son, is there an episode that comes to mind that you would recommend them to start with?
ooh. I would say number one for sure, because it orients the people. The first two really, right? The first one was me pouring out, and then the second one was me having some conversations about my dad. And then episode 5, my dad came on for the first time. I believe it was episode 5 or 6. My dad came on for the first time, and that conversation that we had on camera wasn't staged. We also didn't have that conversation ever before. So we were talking in real time about things that we didn't understand about each other. And like my dad is one of my biggest fans. Some people may assume because it's called Dear Son, what I wish my father told me. He's so proud of me for creating the platform and having the conversations because he knows there's things that he wish he told me and that his father told him. So he understands that the necessity of it and doesn't look at it like, man, my son is he's never considered anything bashing, right? And we both took responsibility of our relationship in that episode. And then he's been on a few times after that. But yeah, I know you asked for one, but 1, 2, 1, 2, 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
1 through 5.
Would be good.
No, I mean, they kind of it makes sense because it kind of shapes what to expect from everything else, but not necessarily. I know sometimes when people get started, it doesn't necessarily make sense in the beginning. So it is dope that you right off the bat you just poured it all out and laid it out for people to know what to come to expect from the show.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know we talked about the mentorship. We talked about the show a little bit and how the mentorship helped give you that final push. And I kind of figure that I know what your answer is going to be, but what would you do the mentorship over again if given the chance? Not redo it, but I'm saying if we were
Mhm.
somehow fast forward, would you still go
Yep.
through with it?
Yeah, absolutely. The information, one thing, and I'm a one thing that it taught me is that like I know I don't know everything, but sometimes I assume I know more than I know. Right. If I have a general understanding about something, I may not invest more time in somebody else teaching me about it because I think I know enough and the rest I can figure out. but there were things that were communicated in a way that clicked for me. So that's one thing. The relationships that I've forged, like from that, like this being one of them, like I value. I don't see these relationships tapering off at any point in my life. So I always find value in that. And then Dave, my experience with Dave has been positive, right? Like he he's very transparent, and his whole platform is showing people, exposing people to information they may not have, and then telling people what he's doing, like in real time. And there's a value in that, just from a principle, right? Because I was one that wanted things to be perfect and never get done. And the saying, "Done is better than perfect." But just seeing, he get on there and tell us that our stuff was terrible. You know what I'm saying? But but he has the authority because his stuff was terrible at first, right? And then we come into the picture where it's successful, and then people latch on to the success. I honestly don't care about names. Like I don't even like the whole name dropping thing. But he was a real one. You know what I'm saying? And he's been accessible. He's kind of shouted out the platform and believed in it. So I was like, like sometimes when you get the confirmation from somebody that's done what you're trying to do, it helps. So yeah, I would do it again. I'm actually, if I'd have been more responsible this year, I would have been at the Miami event a couple days ago. But I had to sit this one out.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I second it. I would do the same thing. I would do it over again because, like yourself, it gave me that push to go ahead and get things where they needed to be, which was the start. And I want to shout out, not only David Shams but his whole team through that whole process. They were very supportive. Shout out to Big Med for being there every Monday, even if it was only two people there, or people weren't, for whatever reason, taking it as serious as some of us. But shout out to that whole team for holding everything down, making the events were always very well organized, and it was just a dope experience. So I definitely wouldn't take that away from anybody. This has been a dope episode so far, but we got to pay some bills, D. John. So we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Who for the moment, gotta know the difference. I can't forget to mention, go get your money and stay out of other people. Go get your money and stay out of other people business.
Welcome back to the Too Stubborn to Fail podcast, where we tell stories about overcoming adversity. Today we have Derek Johns in the building, just to continue an amazing conversation. Not only do you have the podcast, but you started your own network. What was that process like?
Just do it. Like it would. I kind of, sometimes to my detriment, I believe if I see somebody do something, I can do it. So like I'm a big fan of Kevin on stage, his content and his approach, right? And he's always telling stories about, he's amassed this big following, he's consistent, and he's getting told no. Like he was pursuing Hollywood, and then he realized that his community was more valuable to him than Hollywood probably would be, right? So he started creating content for his community. And I think that I have some pretty good ideas content wise, and I know stories that I want to tell. And I really don't want to be in front of the camera. Like I said, 100 episodes, but now I got a host. It's probably gonna go past 100 episodes. But I really, like I said in the beginning, I want to tell beautiful Black stories responsibly. So I got ideas for other podcasts facilitate. I'm working on the documentary. One is close, another one is beginning. I got, my wife and I have conversations under the Healthy Marriage is Dope platform or brand. And I wanna bring more Black love type content to the world, really. And I don't want to limit it to a specific group of people. But I have this constant creative itch that, like, I always getting ideas, always have concepts. and I don't have a reason to wait for somebody to believe in it. And from a perspective of saying, hey, here's a bunch of equipment, here's some studio time, here's a bunch of money to go do it. No, I'm shooting it, right? And some things in the beginning were of a different quality. Now I think I kind of got my stride with the quality, and nobody can stop me from putting it out. Now I can't force people to watch, but I believe that when it catches, I want to have a library of quality content so it's not a fluke. Like to me, that's like one of the worst parts about going viral early is what next, right? And then the pressure of trying to recreate that viral moment. No, I want to give you a library of great content, and when it gets your attention, I think you'll stay.
That's big. And like you said, paying attention to the overall landscape of content creation in general, you're starting to see people realize that same thing where in the past you needed somebody to kind of hold the door for you, but we're now in an age where we can create our own stuff. We like you could just because you decided to, you created your own network. And with platforms like YouTube and everything else that's out there, social media, you don't necessarily need Hollywood ever. You just need to, like you say, work on your brand, focus on the people who like that, and continue to pump out consistent content. And then you look up and you have an entire library of stuff to for people to binge watch once they do learn about the show. So I think we're in a dope space now, a time and space now where we don't have to wait on anybody to validate us in order for us to create. If it's on your heart, if it's in your mind, turn the camera on and see what happens. I think that's dope that we're in that space. What I like to do is kind of give people a little bit of insight on what it is, or what it would take to create their own show or network. Did you have any tips for either? Day one, if somebody's looking to get into content creation, um, what would be those steps that they shouldn't skip, I would say.
First thing I wish that I had done before I shot anything is brain dump, because I have a ton of ideas, and then I would keep them in my mind, and then when it's time to execute, I can't remember half of them. So do a brain dump, and then kind of organize your thoughts into what makes sense. Your brain dump might suggest that you have a niche, or niche, however you say it, that makes more sense to attack, right? And it's all podcast conversation, all sit down interview conversations. For me, I mean, my brain dump was I want a cooking show. I want to show that uh teaches men about like mechanics. Like I don't who knows how to change oil anymore or change a tire, right? I did like the healthy marriage is dope thing with conversations with people that are married or have been married and understand the value of it, right? And different conversations about that. Dear son, I got the documentary series is called Health Me, I Almost Died, where I'm covering stories about people that had near death experiences with their health, most of them unexpected, right? And I'm putting a highlight on that. So I knew that for me, the thread was quality content. It wasn't necessarily, I only want to talk about this. How it makes sense for me and my brand is that the platform is Dear Son, What I Wish My Father Told Me. Every man is a son, right? Whether you have children or not, every man is a son. Every son is birthed from a woman, right? That woman had a father too that was a man and somebody's son. Where we start to get differences, what those relationships were like within each family. Were they there? Were they fractured? Were they fragile? Were they non-existent? Right? So there's no topic that's off limit, because these are all things that I would want my son to have information on. Right? I'm starting a series on black wealth building, right? But not from a sense of a buy my course or getting with somebody that has a course. No knock to those that have good quality courses, but it's telling stories of black families in the DFW area that have really amassed wealth. They become executives, they become CEOs and presidents and chair people. And we're going to tell their stories about what that journey was and how they prepared their family to maintain it. So the creativity, the different genres of content keeps my creativity alive. Because honestly, for me, if I was only doing if I thought the podcast was the extent of it, I probably would have stopped. I probably would have stopped. So
Well, shoot, it seems
yeah,
like
so
you
so brain
always
dump
had
or
the network in your head on some
yeah,
level.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 absolutely. So yeah, brain dump, organize your ideas, and then immediately after you organize your ideas, pick one and shoot it. Whether it's with your phone, your old somebody's old handy cam, 8 mil, whatever it is, pick it up and shoot it to see if it has the potential to translate the way that you thought it would. Because a lot of us are great in our heads, and some ideas that I thought were spectacular, I'm like, execution wasn't there. And for me, I'd rather know those things early to either pivot or fix. Um, and then the other thing is find two or three people that believe all of it is possible. Right? Be careful how you share your ideas and when you share your ideas early, unless you're just that resilient and your skin is that tough. Um, because you could be in a place at that moment where that thing makes perfect sense to you. You run and tell a bunch of people about it, and then next week you realize it's not feasible. Now those people that you entrusted with your excitement, they become less excited every time you have a new idea, especially if you never finish the first one. So I've been kind of closed off, and then like another thing about the mentorship program is you get around other people that kind of believe like you do. You don't all have the same ideas, but nobody in the group is likely to say, "Nah, that's stupid. You can never do that." I didn't experience that. You know what I'm saying? So guard your energy as you're incubating your ideas. Make sure they're healthy before you send them out into the world to get punched on.
Facts. And just to piggyback off of that, the last point, you also in the mentorship specifically were going through it together. So, I mean, a lot of the problems that you were having may not be the exact thing, but somebody in the group was going through the same thing. So I thought that that was another valuable tool to be in the trenches with people who are going through the exact same thing that you are, because everybody was, trying to create and get out of their head. So that was valuable. But another thing I did notice, and you mentioned it earlier, um, that you have experimented with a co-host. How has that dynamic been, and has it in your opinion made the show better?
It's been fantastic for me. It's made the show evolve because um number one, my co-host is committed. And that's one thing because people like to hit them tough talk. So people will want to come on your platform just to have been on your platform. And especially like if it's of a certain quality, they want to be able to have that and share it on social media or whatever. But there's a few conversations that I just don't think make sense because I don't think me and the person are a fit. So my co-host was a guest several times, and we had a personal relationship. Like he's actually my neighbor, my literally my next door neighbor. So I was able to see him, like we pick each other's kids up from school. So it was more about that thread of me seeing who he is as a man and interacting with his family and what he's about. And I was like, oh, and then we were having these conversations anyway. You know how you see somebody in the driveway and then you look up and the sun is set, you know what I'm saying? You still talking like, yeah, I better get inside. It was that kind of thing. So bringing him on also boosted my accountability because we had to schedule it now. If you leave it to your own devices of I'll record when I feel like it, especially for me because of people that approach it like me, because I do everything. And I'm not saying that's the key. I think you should understand every part of the process, but I literally do everything. So I know, like, if we were shooting this episode and I wanted to go up by 7 tonight, I could do that, right? That doesn't mean I should have waited till this morning to shoot an episode to go up at 7 at night, you know. But by having a co-host, now it's a schedule, and we got, like I said, we got some in the bank. So I'm rarely recording on any given week for the episode that week. And, you know, even talking to different people, getting different perspectives, I still have my perspective approaching that conversation. So when you have somebody else's perspective, like, and you'll start seeing episodes where the two of us are talking to another person or more people, it's more than just what I'm thinking at the moment. Because one thing I like about the flow of the co-host is we don't we say it, we don't pregame any conversations. We got a shared list of topics that as we think of stuff, we'll add it. And then when the camera turns on, we discuss it. So it's not like stage or you say this and I'm gonna say this. And sometimes we have different perspectives of the same topic. Like it'll be the topic is what it is, and I'm coming in thinking how I think, and he's taking a different spin on it. I'm like, oh, well, I probably never would have considered that. So I like having a host. The feedback has been good. With any change, people aren't gonna like it. Like I said, I started with just me. Then I started bringing guests on, and I'm not going to limit myself to any of it. So uh, again, following the Shan's model, where it's going to go is a conversation with just us two, like he has the David and Donnie episodes every week, and then a conversation with a guest, whether it's me having a conversation with a guest, both of us, or him and somebody else. Because again, I'm trying to work my way into network management. Not every show has to have D Johns in it because that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, I mean, you got to know where you're comfortable, where your comfort lies, and I definitely, understanding that you're not necessarily needing to be in the spotlight all the time. So, being a producer, it seems to be more of, and you just said it, is more of your lane. It's more of what you want to go to. Um, how does producing other people's content compare to yours? I mean, is it easier, or how? Kind of explain when you your approach to producing content for others as opposed to maybe just the dear son.
I love the challenge of producing for others because they entrust you. In my experience, they've been entrusting me with my approach, like their vision with my approach. They want to communicate a certain thing or they want to have a certain conversation and they'll trust me to frame it a certain way, give it a certain look. I love that because I love the satisfaction of um like the customer appreciating the product. I love that piece of it. And I can be more conscious of what's going on because I only have to be responsible for what's going on. When I'm doing my show, I'm still trying to produce in real time because I'm worried about what the cameras are doing, the audio is doing. Like, are we engaging enough when I'm going to be able to cut this camera to that camera? What point came up? And then I'm trying to manage parts of the conversation, like you said, the callback, like all of that's going in my head, and I'm setting up too. So I think it'd be different if I had a dedicated space, like a studio, um, where we could just come in and sit down and press record. But nah, man, I love the conversation piece of my show. I love the creation piece of everybody else's.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. It's definitely like it's different. But I just wanted to get your perspective on that, especially that you're doing that more now. But I noticed that you got an
Mhm.
ebook. Let's get into that. What's the ebook about?
Yeah, man. The ebook, my first ebook that was in labor for a year. Finally pushed it out. It's called Dear Son, 20 Life Prompts That Facilitate Effective Parenting. And it is a play on the post that I put. Not tweets, because I'm not on whatever it is now, but the IG post that I was putting up was getting a lot of good response and causing people to think. So like there's definitely a big section of my audience that's only there for the post. Because I put a video up, they don't care at all. Right. But for the post, they'll engage. And a few people would hit me in the DMs like, man, it'd be dope to have these consolidated somewhere. And I was like, man, but how can I add value to it? Because just taking the post and putting them in a book, I guess you could do that. But what I did was I took a selection of the posts. There's 100 or something out there now. I took 20 of them for volume one, provided the post, provided my thoughts behind the post, like how I arrived and matured and what lesson I learned. And then I challenge after every with every prompt, there's an exercise for the reader to do, right? And it's challenge you to work on yourself, challenge you to have a conversation with your kids, or be vulnerable in some aspect with your family and journal it, right? So there's some journal spaces for it. But even writing that as I'm recalling my thoughts and doing the challenges myself, I wasn't a fan of me as an author because it really made me like dig deep, be introspective, and figure some things out along the way. And I had a few close people read it to give me feedback, and they found value in it. So um, I think like I was 99% done from probably March to through May. And then I finally finished it in June and put it out. And it's it could always do better, but people are purchasing. I do get feedback. I am not great at selling myself. Like that's big weakness for me is, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing, much less spend money with me, which is terrible. These are not business principles from the Too Stubborn to Spell podcast. It's not at all. But it was a, a deeper. Yeah, yeah. It's some people have requested that I actually do a print version. So that's one thing on my list that I'm gonna complete in August. And by my birthday, it'll be available in print as well. But this is the first, man, and it's one of those things where I had to get it out. And the ebook, it's not a novel by any stretch, but I know I have a longer I don't know if it's gonna be a autobiography. I don't know exactly. It's gonna be telling the story in a much greater capacity. I know I have that in me. I've outlined the chapters. I've just been intimidated to actually do that work. So putting out this ebook was a good exercise, got me in the writing space. And now my goal is to have scheduled writing blocks every week to get that done.
Okay, yeah, that's dope. Mm, man, it just the process of creating forces you to grow so much that it's not even something that you can really explain. It's just one of those things where you literally got to just do it. And I think it's dope that you are finding new ways to expand the brand, finding new ways to get the ideas that are in your head out into the world, and finding new ways to grow. I mean, you're writing, you're producing, you're promoting your content, all of these things, you're working, being finding time for the family. When do you find time for yourself?
Wild thing is, man, I find like a lot of this is about me, right? So I'm parked with my family. Any opportunity I take now has to revolve around the family in some way, or at least not be in conflict with the family, like either in principle in terms of what the content is, or like conflicting schedules. So I get a lot of joy out of the process because it I'm doing it for me. It's not working to somebody else's objective, like in corporate. Like I found joy in that, but ultimately, like I couldn't hand my children those awards or those accolades or even the job itself. So being able to think through, everybody in my house is creative in some way. My kids, even my youngest son has been on the podcast. My my wife is, she creates wearable art, jewelry, and accessories and things like that. So everybody's in that creative space and it pushes each other. And it's cool to be able to say, hey son, we got to shoot today. I need you to come operate a camera, or I need you to come help with equipment to as a way of spending time, but showing him what I'm doing. Like I never went to work with my dad. Like it wasn't that kind of thing. And it's not a knock, but it's just, and even if I did, it wasn't something that he really wanted to do. So it's a different kind of a different take on um, leadership in the house and showing them what's possible. Um, so I get joy out of all of that. So it's I never feel like, man, if I could only go do something for myself. I don't feel like that anymore.
Well, I think it sounds like you just found something that, and you just said it, you just found something that you can kind of incorporate the family into, while finding things that you enjoy. Like for me personally, I enjoy obviously creating, but specifically like when I cut the content up and post it, I get a joy out of that. I get a joy out of people's interaction with certain posts, and you just never know how it's going to affect the public until you put it out. So that's probably my favorite part is the actual overall production of the content, and just having good conversations with people like yourself. It's forcing me to grow as well. I'm so far from where I was on episode 1 to 40, and I think it's dope that you're able to incorporate the family into it. That's big. Um, we having such a great conversation. We got one more break, um, and pay some bills. We'll come back with the too stubborn to fail moment, and we'll wrap this thing up. Real dope photography is more than just dope photos. It's a celebration of your brand, beauty, and confidence at any stage of your life. Our goal is to capture the greatest moments in your life and the world around you. Visit our website at realdopephotography.com. That's realdopephotography.com. And the real is spelled REEL. You know, like a reel of film. Make sure you set up your free consult today. Mention the Too Stubborn to Fail podcast on your booking form in the How Did You Hear About Us section, and you can receive a 20% discount. All right, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the Too Stubborn to Fail podcast, where we tell stories about overcoming adversity. Today we have the dynamic Derek Johns in the building. The conversation has just been it's so easy to talk to you specifically. It's just we got the same kind of vibe, and we're in a similar space, so it's easy to relate and bounce ideas, and this whole thing has just been easy. It doesn't feel like work to me. But what I always like to kind of wrap the show up with is a too stubborn to fail moment. But before we get into that, what comes to mind to you when you hear the words too stubborn to fail?
Getting out of your way, man. Sometimes you could be too stubborn to succeed, right? And I had to flip that on his head to prevent me from staying in the same place because life was easy. Like I was successful in work and that came easy to me, but the things that I was really passionate about, I would put off and I would justify it because I was successful somewhere else. So I think about the inverse of it is, man, what is keeping me? Why am I so stubborn that I can't succeed at the things that are important to me? And now that I've accepted those things and I have a mission and I have a purpose, man, too stubborn to fail is never abandoning the purpose that and the vision that God gave you. I don't think there's a win in life that you can have and sustain if you go against or if you're not acting in accordance with what God has told you to do. And that's not a holy roll, a Bible thumping thing, but when you know your purpose and you're running from it, life gets life keeps kind of pushing you back towards it. So just maintaining the urgency of the purpose and the vision.
I love it. With that being said, the too stubborn to fail moment is a moment where you've had to overcome adversity. I know you may have a lot of things, challenges, tribulations that have gone on that you have overcome, but what's that one that you would like to share, that one moment that kind of sticks out over the rest for you?
Man, the most pivotal moment recently was losing my corporate career, right? And even the way that I framed it still says I had some work to do because I I wanted out of corporate in my mind and in my speak for so long, but I wasn't taking the steps to facilitate that in an effective way. So when the opportunity was removed from me, it exposed me and it put me in a very vulnerable place because that had been my identity for years. The company I was with for 13 years, and I had excelled and I had been promoted. So you find yourself walking in the rooms and in the conversations, introducing yourself as your title, right? Because you think that's important. And when I can no longer do that, I was somewhat embarrassed to even have certain conversations with people because what would I tell them that I do that I can point to successful? Now I have no problem telling people I'm a producer, I'm a podcast, I'm these things, but that's the muscle memory that it took. The other piece of why that's such a critical thing is I haven't pursued corporate since it stopped pursuing me. So I've been all in on this. I got 6 dependents, five children and a wife. I have one daughter in college. My second oldest, another daughter, will be a senior this year. My oldest son will be a junior in high school this year. Then I have a fifth grader and a third grader. Life still has to go on. And not being able to map out how life is going to happen because you're so used to every 2 weeks something happening this way and life being comfortable, like that exposed me, bro. So like even my content took a dip. Maybe not in consistency, but in my confidence in it because I'm like, man, like when you have other income and you have the option, even though it's lying to yourself, to pass this off as a hobby because it's not bringing in the income that sustains you. And if you stop, you're like, no, but my corporate life, I do this. I'm executive over here. Podcast, I'll get back to that. But when you all in on it and people can see your story, and then the people in your house have to adjust their life because things are gonna be different for a while, that put me into place, man. Like that really challenged my character. And I had to do some soul searching and some digging to actually number one, trust God because you don't know you don't know what it is to trust God until you got to. It's the cool thing to say, right? Everybody says it. You can I was gonna say something crazy. In whatever place you are in life, whatever industry and you get an award, you jump on the mic, you say, I thank God. No, full well, nothing that you did had anything to do with representing God. Whole nother topic. And again, it's not Bible thumping. But when you're in a position where God, I can't see it. I cannot see how this is gonna work. Man, this has been my biggest, it's too stubborn to fail season. And I'm honestly just now seeing the light poke through the end of the tunnel. Like within the last 30 days.
Hmm.
So
Fresh.
that's been my moment, man.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, man. That was big,
Fresh.
and I appreciate that perspective, and I always like to get everybody's take on what it means, and then always parlay that into making that personal for you. So I appreciate you sharing that moment with us today. But before we get out of here,
Yes, sir.
let us know where we can find you. Where can we find the podcast, the merch? I didn't mention Healthy Marriage is Dope, but go ahead and tell us where we can find that too, the ebook, the whole nine, whatever you got going on. The floor is yours.
The easiest way is through IG at thedearsonpodcast.com, at thedearsonpodcast.com, all one word, no underscores, anything like that. There's a link to my link tree in my bio. That takes you to everything. That'll take you to actual episodes on YouTube. That'll take you to Apple and Spotify if you're interested in the audio experience. It'll take you to a sample of some of the work that I'm doing under John's Co-Productions, producing for other people. It'll take you to the Healthy Marriages Dope store, which is a brand similar in the sense that it is my wife and I telling stories of things that we've overcome or things that we're working through, and actually probably more things that we're working through in the same vein of what we do on Dear Son, right? Telling you now what we wish you knew then, telling you now what we wish we knew then, so that if you bump your head, it's a choice, right? It's not a surprise. And I think that's it. The Dear Son podcast, like everything to be the most concise, everything is in the link tree. Uh, that's the link in my bio at the Dear Son podcast on IG. It'll take you everywhere, bro.
Okay. Well, make sure y'all tap in. I also have an amazing episode on the Dear Son podcast. If you haven't done so already, go check that out as well. He's doing a lot of great things. The content is amazing, and I look forward to tapping in, more in the future. Um, Before I know we got one last point. Do you have any closing remarks, any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with today?
Proud of you, bro. Keep pushing, man. It's time to run it back. I know I said that before, but we gotta figure that out. But I want to sit down in person, man. So I gotta figure out when we'll be in a similar region, and we'll work that out. But definitely proud of you. Keep going on your platform. However I can support, let me know. Um, Word of wisdom. It's all possible, and I don't say that in a very as a trite expression, but if you know that what you're doing is purpose based and your vision is clear, the trip is worth the travel. So whatever you got to do to get there, you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. The numbers don't tell the story. The likes don't tell the story. The shares don't tell the story. Be true to what your purpose is. Make sure that your heart is pure. Keep pushing.
And I appreciate that. And again, I do appreciate the flowers as well. I know we kind of share some of the same sentiment when it comes to receiving that stuff. But it's always good on some level to, be recognized, even though you don't necessarily do it for the recognition. So I do appreciate the flowers and the love, and just know that it's always mutual. Uh, Before we leave today, this has been an amazing episode of the Too Stubborn to Fail podcast. I am your host, Darren Perkins. Today we had Derek Johns in the building, just jewel after jewel. Amazing conversation today. Again, I appreciate you for carving out some time in your busy schedule to sit down and talk to me today. And best wishes.
Likewise, my brother. Peace.